With the engines of the Citroen C5, everything is simple. Almost any of them can be recommended for purchase, but you should carefully consider the 1.6-liter gasoline engine, which can be either naturally aspirated or turbocharged. 1.6 EP6C 120 horsepower, 1.6 turbo EP6 CDT, EP6 CDTM 156 horsepower. This is the Prince motor, aka EP6, the brainchild of BMW. This engine has quite a few mechanical problems, which were solved under warranty, then something was improved in it, but it still turned out so-so. If this engine survives up to 200,000 kilometers without major overhaul, and this can be achieved by changing the oil every 8,000 kilometers, then you should expect oil consumption to occur through the valve stem seals. If you buy such a car on the secondary market, be careful about diagnosing the timing chain and the condition of the cylinders. This is especially true for turbocharged EP6s. Also, turbocharged engines do not have a very durable high-pressure fuel pump, which is responsible for direct fuel injection. The atmospheric 1.6 is simpler, it has distributed injection. But it also must be kept clean, i.e. do not extend oil change intervals. And you should expect that the timing chain will hardly run more than 120,000 kilometers. 1.8 EW7 125 horsepower, 2.0 EW10 140 horsepower. Other gasoline engines are always naturally aspirated in French, originally from the 1990s. Simple, uncomplicated, but never expensive to break. They slowly leak oil over the valve covers and need to replace the timing belt every 60,000 kilometers. 3.0 ES9A 211 horsepower. We also reviewed the 3-liter naturally aspirated model. This is a simple engine with outstanding power and high fuel consumption. This engine, which is quite simple in its essence, has phase shifters, which can be a problem every 150,000 kilometers. The diesel engines of the Citroen C5 are exclusively French. They all seem more technologically advanced, more interesting in terms of power and efficiency, but at the same time they can hardly be called capricious. A total of 6 diesel engines were offered for the C5, judging them only by their displacement. All diesel engines are with timing belt drive. Perhaps we can immediately generalize that there are no bad engines among them. There are literally no systematic weaknesses or shortcomings. If the engine has been serviced, is not filled with oil either in the area of the gaskets or along the intake tract, does not smoke, does not shake, or puffs gases from the oil filler neck, then in general everything is in order with it. The condition of the injectors is best assessed for drainage using objective data, i.e. by measuring the speed and uniformity of fuel drainage into the return line. Let us immediately note that most of these turbodiesels are equipped with a FAP-type particulate filter. This filter requires the Aisin additive. The 3.5-liter tank for this additive is located under the gas tank. The filling nipple is located behind the rear left wheel. A liter of this additive is enough even for 150,000 kilometers. In general, this exhaust gas cleaning system is not troublesome and is not often removed. To refill, you need to decide on the grade of this additive. To do this, you need to focus on the color of the lock on the quick-release connection of the tube with the tank fitting. Cars manufactured before December 2009 will have a white latch, while others will have a green latch. Accordingly, the brand of additive will be Aisin 176 and Aisin Extend. You can fill 1 liter, this will last for many years. You can fill this tank entirely by purchasing a 3-liter canister. True, it costs about $210. 1.6 HDI DV6C 114 horsepower 8 classes, 1.6 HDI DV6TED4 109 horsepower 16 kL. The younger engine is a 1.6-liter HDI. Its first version, DV6TED4, has a 16-valve cylinder head, and the later version has an 8-valve cylinder head. The fuel system on these engines is from Siemens, i.e. piezo injectors. It is not uncommon for a problem to arise with the electrical wiring harness in the engine compartment, which is expressed by errors in the metering valve, in the accelerator pedal and other failures in the electrical system, sometimes associated with the fact that the engine stalls. The EGR heat exchanger, after losing its seal, becomes the cause of steam from the exhaust pipe and, in general, the source of a decrease in the level of antifreeze. 2.0 HDI DW10BTED4 136 horsepower, 140 horsepower. 2.0 HDI DW10STED4 150 horsepower, 163 horsepower. The 2-liter engines are equipped with a fuel system from Delphi, which, using non-original metering valves from China, is repaired almost on the knees. Typically, on cars with this engine, the engine wiring harness feels good. But due to a malfunction of the brake light switch, the cruise control is disabled or the engine does not start. 2.2 HDI DW12TED4 170 horsepower Bosch. 2.2 HDI DW12C 201 horsepower Bosch. The 2.2-liter turbo diesel is less common. It has a Bosch fuel system and a module of 2 turbines. 778088501S is responsible for the boost. This is such a rare French 4-cylinder biturbo-diesel. In general, it is a close relative of the 2-liter HDI and shares the same problems with it. 2.7 HDI DT17TED4 204 horsepower Siemens. 3.0 HDI DT20C 240 horsepower Bosch. The flagship diesel engines under the hood of the Citroen C5 are twin-turbo 6s with a displacement of 2.7 and 3.0 liters. The younger version has a Siemens fuel system. The older version has a Bosch fuel system. These engines are very dependent on the cooling system. Overheating of the motor can easily happen after 50 to 100 kilometers of flight at a speed of more than 120 kilometers per hour. The engine will simply weld the liners. Everything else is essentially trivial. We talked about them in a separate large review. They also speculated about its oil pump and the grade of oil. AL4, AT8 4-speed automatic transmission. Let's talk about automatic machines. The old AL4 unit works with naturally aspirated gasoline engines with a working volume of 1.8 to 3.0 liters. This transmission was improved many times, but never acquired durable solenoid pressure modulator valves. If this transmission starts to kick, then you should go for a minor repair and replace the failed solenoids. We talked about this and much more in our review of the AL4 automatic, AM6AT6, Aisin TF-80SC 6-speed automatic transmission. The gasoline turbo engine and all diesel engines with a displacement of 2.0 liters or more are equipped with a 6-speed Japanese automatic transmission Aisin TF-80SC. If you partially change the oil in it every 60,000 kilometers or more often, then it will serve for a very long time. The only thing that can happen to it with high mileage is a torn seal on the C2 piston. If this happens, then in 4, 5, 6 gears the transmission will slip hopelessly. In this case, you need to get it repaired as soon as possible. You will have to replace both the C2 piston and the clutches of these 3 gears. The channel has a detailed analysis of this transmission. The 1.6-liter naturally aspirated and 1.6-liter turbo diesels in 2-pedal versions are equipped with an EGS6 robotic transmission. This is a rare exhibit on which there are not many specialists. Its reliability is not bad, it is well diagnosed and needs an oil change. If you are interested in the French robot, we recommend watching the disassembly of this unit. Engine and air conditioner radiators must be cleaned from the outside of debris and dirt, because over time it is because of them that the air conditioner radiator bursts. A hole appears under the fan. Also, the tubes to the air conditioner radiator lose their tightness at the connections over time. They have to be changed and the entire system refilled. The electric fan motor in the Citroen C5, especially in diesel engines and versions with 2-liter gasoline engines, is a sore spot. If it stops working and starts with a push by hand, then its carbon brushes begin to hang up. With age, oxidation also appears on the control electronic board. The electric motor brushes can be changed or at least developed so that they do not freeze. Today, some shops offer repairs to the fan control board for these machines. A new fan assembly, 1253.T2, costs about $430. There are many replacements starting at $120. The right wheel lock does not cover the engine at all, so the crankshaft pulley and its belt quickly become covered with dirt. Its rollers fail prematurely. This gap in the locker should be repaired either with homemade shields or with the original 17136 NK, available for some versions of the Citroen C5. Citroen C5 meets with parking brake servo. This is a troublesome mechanism that has been successfully repaired for a long time. Cracked cable jackets are replaced. Broken plastic gears in its gearbox are replaced. You can find remanufactured servos, 9,674,099,780, for sale for about $170 with replacement for your faulty mechanism. What distinguishes the Citroen C5 from its classmates and even its closest relative, the Peugeot 407, is its hydropneumatic suspension. Here it is called Hydractive 3 Plus and includes 7 spheres, one for each hydraulic strut, and another one in 2 spheres for adjusting the stiffness of the front and rear suspension, respectively. All components of this suspension are reliable and fully repairable. All this runs for 150,000 kilometers or more without any problems. The spheres, which are hydraulic accumulators that have membranes that separate gas and hydraulics, are being repaired today. Hydraulic shock absorber struts with dry hydraulic cylinder seals are also being repaired. The tubes connecting all the hydraulic struts can also be replaced with new ones without any problems. As a rule, it is leaks of operating fluid through the pipe connections that lead to the suspension being deflated and the car lying on its belly. If the car squats on one of the axles, usually the rear one, that there are no traces of hydraulic leakage on the asphalt under the bottom, and when the driver's door is open, the ground clearance is restored, and it does so in jerks, then it's all about the rear suspension stiffening solenoid valve. It is located in the block of rear stiffening spheres, and an electrical wire is connected to it. This valve needs to be removed, disassembled, and its needle cleaned. It is because of its jamming that all the problems occur. The Hydractive 3 Plus suspension hydraulic pump is durable and can also be repaired. But if it stops pumping, then first check the 40-amp fuse in the box under the hood next to the battery. The quality of operation of the hydropneumatic suspension is affected by the presence of air bubbles in its circuit. The air can be released. And another troublesome place in this suspension is soured or loose in the connections of the body position sensor rods. Better change these rods, 5273.E2, in advance. They cost only $8. At the front, the Citroe C5 has a double wishbone suspension, the same for both the spring and hydropneumatic versions. The lower arms are triangular, like in McPherson. In the same way, the rear silent blocks of the lower control arms last the least, about 120,000 kilometers each. They are bought as non-original ones. But when choosing, keep in mind that the housings of these silent blocks come in two types, depending on whether the car has aluminum or steel subframes. Accordingly, 853,640 or 853,642, these silent blocks, popularly called snails, are also different. Front silent blocks donuts can be purchased either as the original 3523.AC for $20 or as substitutes for $9. Both ball joints on which the cams of the front wheels turn, 3640.69 and 3640.74, serve for 200,000 kilometers and become heavily corroded when removed. They originally cost $70 and $40. The four silent blocks of each of the upper arms are durable, 3523.AS and 3523 CA, and the original ones cost $10. Front stabilizer bushings, 5094.98, are sold separately, but they come in as many as 4 sizes depending on the diameter of the torsion bar. Take this into account when choosing. Bushings usually last more than 80,000 kilometers. Original stabilizer links, 5087.52, sell for $30 and last about 60,000 kilometers. Front wheel bearings, 3350.82, are replaced separately. Original ones cost $100. The rear bearings, 3748.87, come complete with the hubs, but cost even less, $85. The rear suspension has 4 levers for each wheel. Original new silent blocks are sold only for the largest levers, and not all of them. Absolutely any silent blocks can be purchased from non-original manufacturers. The Citroe body resists corrosion for a long time and generally has no problems with rust. However, a dozen winters in conditions where roads are generously sprinkled with reagents still break through the reliable layer of zinc. Anything that is sandblasted will begin to rust over time. On the C5, the front fenders are usually the first to give out. Moreover, if the paint on the wings swells, then one should expect that corrosion has already developed strongly inside the wheel arches. In fact, rusty Citroe C5s, especially in the sill area and on the bottom, are not that uncommon. Watch the body carefully. Do not waste time on washing, choose carefully. The Citroe C5 has 2 electric motors in its windshield wiper drive. Years and water flowing from the windshield lead to corrosion of the steel housings of electric motors. When corrosion bulges along the edge of the motor housings, water gets inside and begins to threaten the electronic board. In general, one fine day as a rule, the right wiper stops working. In many cases, it can be revived by a good auto electrician. Usually one chip on the board burns out, the so-called TIA1020T LIN transceiver. You don't have to bother with this, but simply buy the required wiper servo at a dismantling shop. In general, to prevent water from getting into the wiper motor, you need to clean the drains under the windshield. If corrosion has severely damaged the housing cover of the electric motor, then it must be removed, cleaned, painted and installed in place, thoroughly treating its joint with the servo drive housing with sealant. Not an expensive, but common failure is the lack of light from the license plate illumination. It is caused by water and reagents getting under the lampshades, which over time lead to corrosion of the contacts. Often, when pulling a light bulb out of the lampshade, its contact holders break off. The lampshades can be replaced with Chinese LED ones. If one of the rear lights or some section of the Citroen C5 stops burning, and the lamps in them are all working, then inspect the electrical connector. Most likely it has melted. Usually it all starts with melting and deformation of the negative contact. The most reliable solution in this case is to replace the melted electrical connector, 6541K1, using new contacts, 6541E6. Parking sensors on Citroens often get wet, as evidenced by an error in one of them, which is a concern in wet or rainy weather. Parking sensors can also be purchased both at a disassembly site and in China. Front door windows are a very common sore spot in the Citroen C5. Water flowing down the side windows gets onto the cable of the window lift mechanism. The cable rusts and breaks. While the glass is moving, a corresponding knock will be heard. The window lift trapezoid guide roller wears out less frequently. This started happening on 4-year-old machines and is still happening. A new original mechanism with cables, 9221.P7, costs about $60. Replacement is standard after removing the casings. Over time, the front doors of the Citroen C5 stop locking in intermediate positions after opening. This indicates wear of the clamps. The latches are placed in boxes and built into the top hinges of the front doors. If they still perform their function, then try to fill them with grease and lubricate the hinges themselves if they creak. If the latches no longer work, then you will have to buy new hinges. 9035W9 9035x0 for $65 each. Paint them in the body color and install them instead of the worn ones. Pay attention to how the Citroen C5 has a pull for unlocking the hood safety lock. A kind of pedal is moved forward to the chevron logo. It is connected to the lock by a cable. This cable and its braid get clogged with dirt and water, so when you try to open the hood during the first frosts, everything ends with either a broken pedal or a break in its cable. Before the start of the autumn-winter season, the easiest way is to remove this short hood cable and either replace it with a new one, if the old one is already difficult to pull, or wash and lubricate the old one. In addition to the pedal, you can install a claw directly on the safety lock lever, which is standardly used on the Peugeot 407. It is L-shaped and simply fits onto the lever of the hood opening mechanism. Yes, it will sit quite deep under the hood and it is unlikely that you will be able to reach it with your fingers, but you can poke something into it to open the hood. The Citroen key body wears out a lot over time, literally rubbing through. The sting may also fall off. The key body can be bought in China. Moreover, it is empty, into which you can move the stuffing from your key. There are also keys for Citroens with all the stuffing on sale. This new Chinese key can be linked to the car if there is a so-called car pass or PIN code consisting of 4 digits. It was printed on a plastic card and included with each machine. With its help, and if you have a proprietary diagnostic scanner, you can bind all the keys. If there is no PIN code, then you will have to get it by reading the microcircuit from the BSI block. On 5-door Citroen C5S, i.e., station wagons, the steering column switch begins to act up over time. It begins to randomly turn on the rear wiper and windshield washer. In this case, the Dragonfly 6242RK or 6242RH will have to be replaced. You can buy a used one, but it must be from the same manufacturer as the standard faulty one, from Delphi or Vallejo. The small display with orange and black graphics begins to darken over time as the properties of its liquid crystals change. But this problem can be repaired without changing the display itself. If the Citroen C5 is equipped with a large conventionally colored display, then over time green spots will appear on it. As it turned out, they appear due to air ingress. These spots can be removed by smoothing the display with a plastic card or similar tool. The interior of the Citroen C5 is made with high quality, but over the years traces of use remain on the plastic in places where there was frequent contact with fingers. The rubberized steering wheel buttons can look especially unpleasant. The covers on the transmission lever or selector, as well as on the parking brake lever, crack and peel. If the car is equipped with an electric handbrake, the chrome peels off around the button. There are decorative trims on the sides of the leather seatbacks, 887,884 and 887,885, which easily break off when their occupants reach into the rear seat. Repairing broken fasteners of these things is mastered. You need to install screws or pins with a diameter of 3 mm into them, grind off the caps, and return them to their place using new fasteners. 8876.RO. Manual transmissions in the Citroen C5 are generally problem-free, but troubles with the mechanics appear due to souring or broken cables, or tips jumping off the gear selection mechanism. The cables and mechanism on the outside of the manual transmission need to be cleaned and lubricated. Some owners add a front left wheel locker because There is a very huge gap in it on the side of the engine compartment, through which too much dirt flies onto the gearbox mechanism, which causes problems with the cables from the rocker. A Citroen C5 with any automatic transmission may surprise you in that the selector lever cannot be moved out of parking. This occurs due to the failure of the relay that controls the locking mechanism. If you're lucky, after pressing the brake pedal multiple times, the relay may come to life. This relay, 9,673,062,180, costs a couple of dollars and is located in the fuse box under the steering column.